I'd like to, if you'll indulge me, to spend 2, 3, 4 minutes discussing what I believe has been a remarkable success in our moving forward in providing affordable housing or opportunities for folks who otherwise couldn't find housing in our state, prior to introducing our luncheon speaker. As some of you may have heard this morning in the presentation on the future of the real estate markets, in terms of new housing over the last 8 years, 26,000 new or substantially rehabbed units were done by the state government alone. That's equal to about 16% of all the construction of housing that took place in the state of New Jersey, and probably a level, and we can't find data to dispute this, higher than any 8-year period that the state government has been involved. But most important to me over this period has been what we've done for the special needs population. A year ago in December, I guess it was December 2016, I challenged the DCA staff to figure out a way to make 1,000 vouchers available to people with special needs. Well, we've not only met that goal, we have surpassed it by 500. So 1,500 vouchers, 1,500 homes have been provided to people with special needs. In addition, we are now progressing with what's the largest state-run program in the country for Housing First. The governor announced last week 100 additional vouchers there. So we will have 650 families, individuals, being provided housing who are members of that community that are chronically homeless. The success rate has been spectacular. One individual who in the 18 months before he got his apartment, he had 17 visits to the emergency room or other hospital-related activities. In the 18 months since he's been in a stable environment and provided support services there, he has had one visit, and that was a predetermined visit that was expected. We will build on this program and continue to do so. I think it's been wonderfully spectacular. With HMFA, some 6 or 7 years ago, we launched a special needs housing partnership loan program. It's a combination of funds from the state and funds from municipalities, a way for municipalities to be able to meet their affordable housing obligations, where the state is a 50-50 partner. Now, it's going to be we've just about run out of that money. But I will tell you, I think at the November HMFA board meeting, Tony Marquetta and I have been conspiring for a way to substantially fund that program again in the future. It works. It buys houses on the market. They're turned around immediately, and you'll hear more about that in the weeks and months to come. We've done a great deal with our sister governmental agencies, the Department of Children and Family, in keeping families together. A program we began about a year or 2 years ago with 100 vouchers, and now we're expecting 400 to 500 families involved in that program. Thank you. And we've begun and starting to collect some real data on benefits and our reentry programs. The cycling of people in and out of prison is one of the worst aspects of society and how it's been run for too long. We're in the 3rd year of funding programs in about 3/4, or will be after this year, 3/4 of the counties of the state. Not only are we stabilizing individuals and helping them with social service activities, but there's real data to success that there's been a huge drop in recidivism rate. These are the programs that government does best. And I'm, I guess, proud and Honored to have been part of that with staff from HMFA and our staff from the Department of Community Affairs, because I believe we and you are making a real difference that's measurable, insightful, and something we can tell the rest of the country about what we're doing. And I thank you for your effort. Today I have the pleasure of introducing this year's keynote speaker, Avi Telyas. Avi is a city planning strategist and entrepreneur. He calls his new endeavor employment-oriented development. When he was at Harvard, he embarked in creating his first and purchased his first business. No, it was not Facebook. It was a manufacturing activity. From there, he patented a technique that creates modular housing in high-rise buildings, and some of that technique is being used in the Barclays Center. In 2005, he found his way to New Jersey and purchased a company called Coleman Industries. Now, everyone in New Jersey has had at least one meal in a diner, and Coleman is one of the premier builders of diners all over the country. If you live in North Jersey, Tick-Tock Diner was built by Coleman. And a number of these structures found their way into the National Historic Registry. He has a passion for architecture and creative entrepreneurship. The idea of melding employment-oriented development in communities, in neighborhoods, where we can better link housing, maybe kind of going back to the future, and where the small entrepreneur, the small business can evolve and see not only living in a given space, but provide for jobs in that space. Avi will go over the numbers because I keep forgetting them when I watch his presentation. But the real treasure in creation of jobs in America is that 5 and under operation, that 5 and under business. And that's what he's aimed at and wishes to bring back to New Jersey in a meaningful and successful way, particularly our urban developments. Avi Telyas.
So yeah, just on my way here, Chuck, I wanted to tell you I got a call from the governor. Weird, he called me up. He wanted me to say that he appreciates everyone here and appreciates the fact that you came to this conference. That's of course the governor's conference, and really strange. He said that as a result, everybody that's registered in this conference gets a free car. I guess that's what he said, you know. And yeah, he's looking under his seat. Yeah. So yeah, it's a brand new car. Except as always with politicians and lawyers, there's some fine print, right? So he said, but you won't have any money for gas, and you'll never have any money for gas. So that car will go nowhere. In many ways, all kidding aside, in many ways, this is a little bit like our housing, affordable housing policies. We spend a lot of energy giving homes and producing homes that are affordable, but without work and without a job, the folks that we're trying to help will find it very difficult to sustain their families and their lives in these apartments or houses, for that matter. And so it's a little bit giving somebody a car without the fuel. So how do we get here? How do we get into this situation where so many of us live in cities and under these conditions? According to the UN, just in the last few years, humanity passed a pretty important threshold where over 50% of the world's population lives in cities. And no doubt attracted to by what Aristotle said was a opportunity for making a living and living well. But after giving rise to a great middle class, why do so many of our citizens experience such financial hardship and difficulties? You talk about some of the cities that I work in, Patterson or Camden or Atlantic City for that matter, but Detroit and Baltimore and many others. These are just some of the sort of examples we're familiar with. And there's other cities around the world that are experiencing the same difficulty. So what happened to sort of living well? Well, part of that is, planned and built at a different era. Our cities are built really for a different economy. And could it be that the way we build our cities really is the reason why so many of us are having a difficult time and are being so challenged? And if we change the way we build our cities and plan our communities, maybe we can reverse that. Maybe we can usher in some new economic prosperity and social harmony, a kind of a post-industrial, post-digital world, sort of a capitalism for the rest of us. So let's explore how that could be done. Our most recent move to the city, of course, began with the Industrial Revolution. But I'd like to take you back a little bit further to the time in the 1500s, maybe even before that. Pictured here on the screen is a typical village. The Lord's Manor is right there in the center, you can see that, along with a smattering of shops, a church, a bakehouse, a blacksmith. Those little cottages there is where the serfs that worked the land worked there. And in the winter, they would make products, whether it's food or whether they make, sweaters and so on. And somebody would come along with a cart and take those into the cities and sell them. That's hence the term cottage industries. And then over there on the lower right-hand corner in the picture, you see a place called a common pasture. This is where the villagers grazed their cows or chickens or goats, whatever it was, by mutual agreement. So they had a sort of a right to a certain amount of space and also a certain amount of trees they were able to cut down and so on. It was the way the villagers had a way to take care of their families. So there was a specific design and economic structure to help them take care of their families. To be sure, life was pretty difficult. Fortunately, though, technology, as always, is always racing and marching to relentless pursuit of efficiency. And some really smart English guys invented clever machines to make life easier. Some really smart Americans did as well. This is Henry Ford's famous assembly plant, where the $5 an hour wage was such a hit. And then we built some wonderful cathedrals for these innovations and activities. This is the Packard factory designed by Albert Kahn. Somebody last night told me there was an Albert Kahn designed factory in Edgewater, which is kind of interesting, which was taken down. Our activities grew, and the cities grew around these factories, and then the middle class was ushered. The idea of wage labor became sort of the standard, and there was kind of an unwritten social impact, a social contract, where if you worked hard over the years, your income would steadily rise. But then less than 100 years later, this is where we are. Our factories contaminated, shut down, and abandoned. In those wonderful factory towns and cities, well, this is what happened to many of them. These are pictures actually taken 2 years ago by 21-year-old student Dakota Santiago of abandoned buildings in Jersey City. It's part of what we call post-industrial misery, and really want to know how did we get into this situation? Post-industrial misery is affecting 45 million Americans who live below the line of poverty. I know we just went through some fairly horrendous natural disasters in storms and hurricanes, but those numbers pale in comparison to the 45 million who wake up every day living below the line of poverty. It affects women and children disproportionately. 1 out of 5 children in America lives below the line of poverty. Even those who work, 50% of us make less than $30,000 per year. And the thing to note, it's a natural phenomenon, it's worldwide, and it affects everyone. It's part of, whether you call it automation, globalization, or technology. These charts here show what the poverty rate is in America from 1967 through 2012. The interesting thing about here is given the kind of misery we just described, government really has very little choice but to make up that gap with transfer payments, essentially taxing folks in this room and passing it on to those who need it most. As you can see, in 1967, the chart on the top shows poverty rate in America without any government assistance was 25%. Left alone, it would be around 32% today. The only reason that the lower red line line is at 15% is because of the government assistance that does help. What's interesting is that the gap between these two lines is getting bigger and bigger. As you can see, it was much smaller. The poverty rate was 12% in '67. It's 15% today. That's clearly an untenable situation because we have to funnel more and more and more money to just keep the poverty rate where it is. And of course, that's very difficult to do. And the problem is, with the politicians, they talk a lot about the band-aids of how to fix that. Rarely do you hear them talking about solving the actual problem at its core and curing this disease. These lines are persistent as a result that we're not talking about any structural shift, we're really talking about just topical solutions. So we're losing, at the very least we're not winning, the war on poverty. And I believe we're losing because we're fighting on the wrong front with the wrong strategy. And it's not because we don't have enough money. The American Heritage Foundation recently did a study. Since the war on poverty was declared, we spent close to $22 trillion trying to solve this problem. And as you saw from the other chart, it actually got a little bit worse. So we need a fresh approach. A comprehensive sort of wraparound, all-out attack on this problem at its core source. It's got to be a market-based solution with power equal to this relentless power of globalization and automation that you're seeing. And it's got to have a sustainable financial approach because, as the guys at my table will tell you, all subsidies and funding eventually runs out. So we must tackle this problem on three fronts and simultaneously on all those three fronts. We must provide employment opportunities for those most disadvantaged. We must provide affordable housing for them as well. And we must facilitate wealth accumulation. This third term is often overlooked. Many families are just one accident away from a job loss, or one health scare away from a job loss. Fighting and even winning on any two of these, and I applaud a lot of the successes that are done on housing and so on, but if you're not dealing with all three and winning on all three, you don't really move that chart that we saw before, and that's kind of the problem. As I said, if you have a affordable house with no job, it's like a car with no gas. Or if you have a job, but you can't afford to live there, it's like Brooklyn. So, what we need are cities designed as opportunity platforms with affordable entrepreneurship and affordable home ownership for everyone. Kind of a holistic solution which transforms when the economy transforms. It's what we call employment-oriented development. So with guidance and input from the folks at Newark's CEDC and Mayor Ras Baraka, as well as Patterson's Economic Development Office, we introduced this concept of employment-oriented development, where the built environment, our very brick and mortar of our city, is designed to spark and support local economic opportunity. Specifically, EOD is an urban land use policy and a planning strategy that facilitates self-employment and self-reliance through affordable live-work developments that improve family income and, of course, strengthens communities. We call our project Makerhoods, a neighborhood for makers, not takers. We have two such projects under development, the nation's first ones, right in New Jersey. Let's take a look at Newark and the Patterson Makerhoods. The Newark Neighborhood Project includes the rehabilitation of the iconic Kruger Scott Mansion. I spoke to some of you, you know the mansion, which has been in disrepair and abandoned for over 20 years, along with the construction of new, affordable live-work units at the rear of the property. The mansion has a wonderful history, as most of New Jersey. It's listed on the State and National Register of Historic Places. Its original owner was a beer brewer named Gottfried Kruger, who was the first to deliver beer in cans. God bless him. But as interesting, the second owner was a woman who came up from the South in the 40s. She started by cleaning houses, but had an interest in hair care products. At first, she sold a few, and then a few more, then opened one store and another store, and then a school. And in 1954, she made enough money to buy this mansion. She became Newark's first African-American millionaire. So imagine being a millionaire today, let alone an African-American woman in the 40s. It was so incredible that the governor came to visit this woman who bought this mansion. Yeah, New Jersey has a great, great history. So the project has two components. The live-work community is going to be brand new built, and as a business incubator that will be housed in the mansion. The city has been very supportive, adopted what's called a makerhood zoning. It's a zoning that allows mixed use, but specifically also allows light industrial activities downstairs. So if you're a cabinet maker, you make lights, you make some kind of food products, you can manufacture that downstairs and live upstairs in this kind of zoning. Very innovative and very new. The thing that's interesting about it is you have to live there, and at least 20% of the units have to be for makers. So it literally is a development that is geared towards generating entrepreneurial activity. The 66 apartments are clustered around the courtyard where there's a farm that's currently being run by the Newark Conservancy. We're going to keep the farm. We're going to call that our edible landscape. And it's an interesting story. One of the young men that works on the farm is a veteran. And he said, look, once you build this thing, can I run a juice shop? We can grow the vegetables right here on the farm, and I can run a juice shop right in the neighborhood here. I said, absolutely, that's exactly what this is for. And the community courtyard, of course, is kind of the center gathering place. Typically, if you look at a lot of retail, they all talk about facing the street. And we think it's more important that they face each other. Because what happens is it's a place for sharing experiences, sharing connections. There's a lot of talk about small businesses lacking in capital. But equally important is the dearth of social capital, the connections, the people they know, the kind of experiences they share. That's why we do it in a cluster, and that's why we do it sort of facing each other. It's also a great place to host events and activities as well. This is what the buildings in the back look like. Each apartment is about 650 square feet, the ones that are affordable, and the workshop is about 650 square feet. And for $1,800 a month, an urban entrepreneur or a working family can rent both. So they can run their business downstairs and live upstairs. Market rate apartments are planned throughout the rest of the buildings and the rest of the area. And that's important for two reasons. Number one, typically in market rate, you'd have people with higher income, and you want that higher income in the community to spend at the shops. Secondly, you also want the folks that are typically professionals or sort of have gainful employment in other locations to be able to share the experiences and the intellectual knowledge that they have. So you really want mixed use, mixed income, and mixed experiences. This is a model of what it looks like. You can see the mansion in the front and the new construction in the back. Selection for the tenants is rigorous and comprehensive. We work with a lot of the local organizations that do fine work and entrepreneurial training. And so we pick, in this case, there are 16 shops. We pick the 16 shopkeepers ahead of time. We put them through training as a group, not only training in business, but also training as what does it mean to be a community. Sometimes we think you put a park bench and a fountain and you have community. That's not enough. The folks that live in that community need to understand what their roles and responsibilities are as well. So we'll go through a little bit of self-governance training. And so they're a community way before they even set foot on the property. The next one is one in Patterson. It's sort of fresh off the presses. Patterson is another great New Jersey story. This one is right in the Great Falls National Park, called Valley of the Rock, the area. In many ways, Patterson is a poster child for some of this post-industrial misery that we talked about. It was the location of our nation's first industrial policy, planned and executed by none other than Alexander Hamilton. And after many firsts in America, first in aviation, firearms, submarines, of course the silk trade, and like many other industrial cities, it fell into disrepair when the jobs move out to the suburbs or overseas. Nevertheless, Patterson does retain a lot of its core DNA to this day. It really is America's original makers. Indeed, New Jersey has such wonderful history. The makerhood in Patterson, again, it's called the gateway to the park. It really is at the edge of the park. And the idea is that when families visit the park, they have a place to go. It's a living, working, and entertainment development that seamlessly integrates into the park. The National Park Service, in fact, held a competition a few years ago, and the project in Patterson won. Not our project, but the park project won. The idea is that you don't any longer want to put gates into parks. You want to be able to thread them into the fabric of the community, and that's exactly what we're doing here. We cluster the housing and the shops in one area of the site, leaving open space in front of it and near the river. We're also we're converting an old mill to a food hall that we're calling Patterson 52, named after the 52 different nationalities that exist in Patterson. And long-term plans call for a new museum for Patterson. The one they have now is under disrepair, as well as a nature program on the island that's there. The nature program is sort of near and dear to my heart. I'm interested in equestrian activities, so there's a program called Work to Ride, where local youth work in the stables and they get to ride and enjoy that activity. This is a picture of what that model development looks like, and you can see architecturally it sort of harkens back to the industrial age of Patterson. So between these two projects, two small projects, not very large, we create 60 live-work spaces for makers. And according to all the statistics on the average from these kinds of shops, they'll generate about 260 jobs and probably another 300 indirect jobs. Now, these are jobs for local entrepreneurs, folks that might find it more difficult to join the labor force on a regular wage employment, but have talent and skills and abilities and ambitions that we can help them realize. I often say I'd love to hear a young man walking through and say, "Hey, Mr. Smith, if I sweep the floor of your shop, will you teach me how to make cabinets?" We sort of need to harken back to that time so youth have an option and an opportunity, and of course, hope that they can get involved as well. Just so you would understand that these don't only work in large projects. This is a small one, 50 by 100 foot lot, and I'm sure a lot of you in the cities have these abandoned lots that are 50 by 100. Something as small as this will give me 16 apartments and 5 workspaces. That's, again, 5 families, maybe 20 jobs right inside the neighborhood. So who are these makers? So this is Chris Anderson. He's a Jersey City resident. This is him taking a picture on the day when he graduated from Rising Tide. And he wanted to open up a little tea shop. And, of course, reality struck when he started looking for space. A small space, maybe 800 square feet, in the good part of town was $2,000 a month. In the more difficult part of town was $1,500 a month, not much of a difference. So you add that to his housing costs and everything else, and the fact that you need credit and so on and so forth, he just wasn't able to open up the shop. the barriers proved to be too high. And we can and should do better for Chris and thousands more like him. He did what we would ask of anyone in society to do. He went, he got the training, he went through the program, only to face the barrier that he couldn't overcome. Or meet Stacy. Stacy founded a company called Jewel of the Pillow. She found herself out of work one day with 2 children, single mother, but her mother taught her how to sew. So as resourceful and genius as she is, she said, you know what, I'm going to make these pillows, these throw pillows, and she started selling them for $20 to $35 each. If she had a makerspace like this, she can live upstairs with her 2 children and probably employ 4 or 5 folks downstairs on sewing machines making her pillows and earn a good living. Another one is Kim. I was introduced to Kim at Rutgers by Lanier Richardson, who runs the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. And she actually turned me on to a really smart idea. She said, you know, Avi, she makes jam. And right now she makes them in the back of French stores or in the back of kitchens and so on. She says, you know, if I had my own kitchen, she said, I would be able to pay your entire rent with what I call my jam sessions. I said, Kim, what's a jam session? She said, oh, that's when I have parents and their children come by and make jam together. They pay $40. I said, you know, I would think 100 times before I buy a $3 jar of jam, but I would spend $40 with a child in a minute. So she really turned me on to this idea of it's not just a space for making, it's also an experiential space. And that's really how you compete with the online businesses. Another one, and I'm dying to bring these folks to Newark from Brooklyn. This is Keiko Hirusu. And she's an industrial designer. When she graduated, she opened up a little shop where it's a co-working space. For $40 an hour, you can rent the software, the machines, and the equipment to make your own shoes. And of course, she also uses it to make her own shoes. And so the thing I really like about this is if you look at that picture in the lower right-hand corner, it's literally in the street. Again, I would love to see the young folks go by and say, hey, I may want to do that. That's kind of an interesting thing to do. So I'm trying to bring her to our project in Newark and Patterson. But we do recognize that in today's economy, it's not enough, as the saying goes, just to teach a man to fish. That's no longer enough. You really have to help him sell his catch so he can feed his family. So we need a little bit more services than just giving them space. So we created this Maker's Web, which is a hyper-local online platform and a back office service so that it can help them run the business and be efficient on getting online. You know, there's a lot of talk about the income divide. There's also a digital divide. If I had to open a dress shop tomorrow, I wouldn't even know how to begin to market online. It really is that complicated. So we do need to provide that service as well. And we have in the works now an automated chatbot called Auto Mentor. So literally an automatic chatbot that would text with you and look through your financials and give you hints and mentorship to help you improve your business. So what could a potential entrepreneur's income be in a situation like this? Well, you could probably expect about $200,000 a year in revenues. If the product cost and labor is 65%, maybe another 13% or $25,000 in operating costs, you can have a wage equivalent $45,000 income. Remember, half of all Americans are making less than $30,000. In the communities we're talking about, she's probably, if she is working, making $25,000. So if we can build something and then she has an opportunity to earn $45,000 and maybe even save $5,000 to $8,000 a year, that deals with that third goal that we set for ourselves, where she would increase her savings. It really will be a pretty good start in the battle against poverty. So as an economic development policy, microbusiness is good business. These are just some statistics that are studied by the Aspen Institute. Typically, a small business like this will employ 3.9 employees with the owner. It's about 22 to 28% rise in income. You can see here their average sales is $317. I was a little bit more conservative. I used $200,000. And here's the interesting part. These little businesses pay their employees $13 to $18 an hour, way above the minimum wage. The reason is it's usually family members and people they know. It is a very big part of our economy. You just don't see it as much. The Association for Enterprise Opportunity, a great organization out of DC that advocates policies for micro businesses, does a lot of research. So, first of all, 92% of all businesses in America fit this model. They're under 5 employees. There's 40 million people that are affected by these kinds of businesses. An interesting statistic, too, is as a business owner versus somebody who works at a wage job, you're going to have 2.5 times the wealth. And here's where it gets really interesting. If you're an African-American woman business owner, your wealth will be 10 times larger than if you're working. It's 5 times larger for Latino men. Really powerful engine. So, how do we do this? How do we create these kinds of employment-generating or employment-oriented developments? Well, 3 easy steps. You have to start with employment first. Number 1, you have to create the marketplaces. Create those areas where small-scale entrepreneurs can meet their consumers and their customers, their clients, to be able to make a living. 2, that generates the jobs, and that's where you support them in their business. And 3, that will sustain the housing at reasonable rates with minimal subsidies, because now they're making more money. They can afford a better home. So what does that mean specifically? We need to dramatically increase the supply of small-scale commercial space. Can't say that enough. In every new development that you're approving, that you're looking at, you have to think about how much more space is there for local entrepreneurs to occupy. Maker zoning, very important. I applaud Patterson and Newark for passing what's called makerhood zoning, which literally says that you can manufacture downstairs in a residential community as long as the space is small, as long as you live there, and as long as there are at least 20% others like you in a cluster. Again, for the table that I'm sitting, we need to expand the job grants and incentive to micro businesses. If you saw the statistics from before, 95% of all businesses are under 5 employees, but a lot of the state's programs start at 10 employees or more. So we're literally boxing out some of the most important people that we're trying to help. And then there's an idea that actually came out of Harlem, out of New York, by the council there, commercial inclusionary zoning. Maybe we give, I know we talk a lot right now about inclusionary zoning, maybe we give developers an option to do affordable homes or affordable commercial space. Maybe that'll be a little bit more palatable. And New York City is proposing just that in Harlem. This is a way of working in this concept in some larger developments. What you see here is a project by Ralph Rapson built in the 70s in Minnesota, and it shows you that you can do the towers, the luxury towers. Let them go high as they want, let them charge what they want. But over there on the lower level, you see mid-rise buildings, and that's where we can put these affordable live-work communities, these affordable live-work units, specifically geared towards the local entrepreneurs. So now, when the tower becomes occupied with some wealthy individuals, the commercial activity that's generated flows directly to the local community that's occupying those shops. A truly symbiotic market of buyers and sellers created for the benefit of local entrepreneurs. Generating the jobs, we need wraparound services. As we said before, just teaching a man to fish isn't enough. That includes training, microloans, business development support, personal literacy, financial literacy, credit enhancement. You know, somebody once said to me, gosh, Avi, that's high touch. That's a lot of work. And my answer was, it's a lot less work than incarceration or opioids. We really do need to deal with this problem. We need to remove the barriers. You all heard the funny stories about needing 29 different licenses to open up a nail salon or a hair salon. Really crazy, but we need to make that a lot more streamlined. And we do need to provide back office as a service, and the internet is doing a lot of that. I was talking to a banker, said, we love to make loans to these kind of businesses, but then they come to me with a box full of receipts. That's their accounting system. So we do need to work on that level as well. But the thing is, cities need to understand that for them, every day is Small Business Saturday. And as economic development strategy, the ROI is fantastic. For every dollar that you spent on the things that I just spoke about, you'll get $9 in benefits. It is really the best paying economic development strategy out there. Nothing even comes close to that. 3, you sustain the housing. This live where you work strengthens communities. People have a vested interest. It does also offer what we said before, social modeling. When the kids in the neighborhood see how you make a living, and maybe spurs an interest in them picking up a similar trade or activity. And you do need to celebrate these successes. They're not celebrated enough. At the Kruger Mansion, we're going to initiate the Newark Entrepreneurial Leadership Awards, celebrating the success of these mom and pops, not just the typical businesses that get celebrated. And it's not told enough. This is an interesting story for me here. This is Dr. Mark Dean. How many of you have ever heard of him? So Mark is the owner of the first 3 patents of the IBM PC. Or a phrase, the real McCoy. You must have heard that before. Well, that's Elijah McCoy, who invented the drip irrigation cup on the railroads in the 1870s. He too was an African American. Those stories, there are so many more, are inspirational. They need to be told and repeated and emulated. So permit me for a minute to say what employment-oriented development is not, and especially now when everybody is busy working on the Amazon project. So number one, what it isn't is you cannot pick winners. You will never compete with Wall Street or Silicon Valley. Too many sharks, they're too smart. You can't pick the winners in your city. You'll have much better success if you focus at the bottom of that pyramid, what I call that primordial soup of entrepreneurs and hustlers. Make their lives easier and more hospitable, and eventually they'll give rise to the next Facebook, Google, and Amazon. So Bill Gates famously said, when they asked him, what scares you the most? And he said, honestly, 2 guys in a garage is what scares me the most. So why don't we build, rather than give all this money they're about to give to Amazon, which probably won't even pay off, why don't instead of that, why don't we build 1,000 garages or 10,000 garages? Our odds are better, and it's definitely much, much cheaper. Take every new planning fad or mantra, including mine, with a healthy dose of skepticism. In our role of designers, builders, planners, financiers, we're dealing with very long-term assets, housing and buildings and so on. Literally, our decisions are cast in stone. Remember Richard Florida? It's actually from Newark. In 2004, he wrote a book called The Rise of the Creative Class. And soon after its publication, cities started to woo artists and sculptors and musicians and all kinds of creatives to their cities. And then they followed up with bike lanes and park benches and pocket parks and arts districts, and my favorite of all, parklets. Right? And colleges and universities began to teach creative placemaking. Right? It was called a major breakthrough idea by Harvard. Nothing wrong with these ideas, right? But just as we were building all these things, installing them around the world, Mr. Florida had a change of heart. And in 2016, he wrote a mea culpa book called The New Urban Crisis. Apparently, all those creatives led to further inequality, segregation, and displacement. So now we have to undo all of those. So you have to take all that with a grain of salt. So with employment-oriented development, chasing the latest fad or the latest Amazon trick, and that's really fraught with danger, because creatives do change their mind, and Amazon could always move away. Remember, Camden was built by a shipping industry, right? And when they died, the city died. Sears was the Amazon of its day, and look what happened to it today. But the core working class of our cities will always stay there. They are the ones that we should be wooing, and they are the foundation of our cities. Ironically, if you take care of those folks and you create a diverse and healthy entrepreneurial and a vibrant economy in your city, the Amazons of the world will knock on your door and want to come to your city. There's a growing number of aspiring and would-be entrepreneurs. And as a matter of planning strategy, as a matter of policy, our built environment must accommodate people's desire, their natural desire for self-reliance. The question is how to do that for all citizens, not just the ones that are most capable. We've come up with an idea we're calling employment-oriented development, as embodied by our Makerhood programs. But these are not original ideas. Remember that common pasture there in the lower right-hand corner? That was the place to tend your sheep and maybe cut down a few trees. It's not as far back in history as you think. The last one in the U.S. was closed in 1830. It was the Boston Common. Where is our 21st century common? Let's create that 21st century common. Let's build cities of opportunities. And finally, let's declare victory on the war on poverty. It's been an honor and a privilege really to speak to you today. I want to basically reach out to those who work in the affordable housing and micro-business space. Having met so many of you over the last few years, I'm humbled by your tenacity and perseverance as you go about your daily work. Specifically, Barbara Dunn of Habitat for Humanity in Patterson, who's been a friend and a supporter, but there are many others. You compete for land with some of the savviest investors in the U.S., sharks like me, and you compete for funding with those same people that are often much better connected. Yet, you get up every day to accomplish your mission of helping for no reason than it's the right thing to do. I'm humbled by your dedication and feel irrelevant in my work compared to yours. You are society's safety net and a safety valve as you offer hope and services to those who have neither. I also want to thank Chuck Richman, Commissioner of Department of Community Affairs, Tony Marchetta, Executive Director of the NJHMFA, and Tim Lazura, the EDA, for inviting me to speak before you today. I know you share our vision of helping those most challenged and are also hard at work every day to improve the lives of all in New Jersey. Thank you so much.